Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's presentation. My name is Marissa with Legal Aid of North Carolina's Helpline. Today we have Ashira Corbin presenting for us. If you are unfamiliar with the format of this event, first, Ashira is going to review a PowerPoint presentation. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box on Zoom or the comments section on Facebook. We'll review all questions put in the chat boxes during the Q&A session at the end. Please remember that this is a public forum and Legal Aid is not representing you at this time. Ashira will go over this in more detail, but please remember to keep your questions as general as possible, as we cannot provide any legal advice specific to your individual situation. The session will end when there are no more questions, and regardless of where we are with questions, we will have a hard stop at 4:30 p.m. With all that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Ashira to get us started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashira Corpening. I'm an attorney here at Legal Aid, specifically public benefits attorney in the Greensboro office. Megan usually does these presentations, so I'm filling in for her today and just picking up where she left off. So we're going to talk a little bit about Social Security Disability Insurance, which is SSDI, and Supplemental Security Income, which is SSI. Specifically, we're going to talk about applications and appeals for each of these disability-based benefits. And keep in mind that we're just going to talk about adult cases today. Children cases can be a little different. So everything we say today applies to adult cases. We'll start with an overview of SSDI and SSI eligibility. We'll go over the application process, and then we'll talk a little bit about appeals. So let's start with the definition of disability for adults. In order to qualify for federal disability benefits, you have to meet both medical and non-medical criteria. Here we have the definition of the medical criteria that you must meet, which I'll read, is the SSA regulations define disability as the inability to do any substantial gainful activity by reason of any medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which can be expected to result in death or which has lasted or can be expected to last for a continuous period of not more than 12 months. So this is the medical definition of disability that you must meet. More simply, this is saying that you have to have a severe medical condition that prevents you from working, but on a competitive and full-time basis. Both SSI, which is Supplemental Security Income, and SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, meet this, share this definition in common for disability. So that definition of disability is the medical criteria. Next, we'll talk about non-medical criteria for each of the programs. It differs for SSDI and SSI. SSDI is the first one we'll go over. Common names include SSDI, which I've been using, which stands for Social Security Disability Insurance, and then DIB, which is Disability Insurance Benefits, and Title II, which comes from the law that establishes the benefit. Any interactions you have with people at Social Security, they typically will use the Title II name. So if you hear that, they're referring to SSDI. So SSDI is an insurance program, and the way it kind of works is that when you work at a job, you pay into the SSDI system via what's called a FICA tax. That FICA tax will get you work credits. And so the dollar amount that you receive in what's called PIA, or primary insurance amount, is based on a formula using your work history. So all that to say is the benefit amount, or the PIA, is based on your wage history at your job and the work credits that you get. Next, SSDI is not a means tested benefit, which differs a little bit from SSI. Not means tested means that if you otherwise qualify for SSDI, you'll qualify regardless of your income or your resources. In order to receive this benefit, you must be both disabled, which we spoke about the definition of that earlier, and insured through your work history. Both of those are requirements to receive SSDI. The benefits are payable 5 months after what's called your established onset date. So if your claim is successful, you will be able to get benefits starting 5 months after that date, but no more than 1 year before the date of the application. Lastly, SSDI is linked to Medicare, which means that you will be entitled to Medicare coverage if you receive SSDI after a 24-month waiting period. Next, we'll talk a little bit about SSI and the non-medical criteria for SSI. Again, SSI is supplemental security income, and it's referred to as Title 16. So if you speak with someone at Social Security, they'll usually refer to it as Title 16, and they're talking about SSI. The benefit amount specifically for North Carolina for 2025, if you receive SSI, is $967 a month. That's that 2025. That FBR there stands for Federal Benefit Rate. And so the government sets those, and that's the max that you'll get if you receive only SSI. Keep in mind though, that benefit can be reduced if you have other kinds of income or what's called in-kind support, which means financial help from outside of your household may reduce the benefit amount that you receive. SSI, as opposed to SSDI, is a need-based program, which means it is means tested, and it is for low-income individuals, for people who have low resources. This is around, this means that you have less than $2,000 if you're an individual person, and less than $3,000 as a married couple will qualify you for SSI. In order to get SSI, like we spoke about earlier, you have to be disabled under Social Security's definition or 65 or older. So that's an either or right there. Benefits, if you're approved, are payable back to the first of the month after the month of the application. And SSI is linked with Medicaid. So if you receive SSI, you're eligible for Medicaid. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the Social Security offices, because there are some differences. The Social Security Administration is the federal agency. They're the big umbrella who administers the benefits, and that's like the big umbrella. After that, we have the Social Security field offices, and those field offices are local offices. So in most interactions that you have with Social Security will be through those local field offices. And I have a locator linked here. If you click on this link, you'll be prompted to put in your zip code, and it'll tell you which local field office will handle your case, which directs you to who to call, has their fax number, all that good stuff is there. Next, we have DDS, or Disability Determination Services. This is where your case gets sent for workup after you apply. And so they determine whether you meet that definition of disability that we talked about earlier. DDS makes that determination. I have their contact on here. If you had to do something called a consultative examination, it would also be through DDS, which is basically meet with a Social Security doctor. All that would be through DDS. Next, we have the Office of Hearing Operations, which we refer to as OHO. OHO is where you would appear before what's called an administrative law judge. So if you get to that level, you'll have a hearing in front of an ALJ, or administrative law judge, and it would be through OHO. So that's where your hearing will be held. And same thing there, I put the locator. If you click on there, you click your region, I believe, and it'll tell you which hearing office is in your area and that your case would be assigned to. Lastly, we have Appeals Council. The Appeals Council is a body of appeals judges, and they handle the final level of your administrative appeal. So for instance, If you are not successful at the hearing office level, that's when you would submit an appeal to the appeals council, which their number is also listed here. So we'll talk a little bit about the application process. I have a note here at the bottom that the SSDI application can be filed online, but some SSI applications can't be filed online. If that's the case, you can call your field office, the local office, or you can set up an appointment at a field office and they can help you apply for those cases where you can't do it online. And you can find what your field office is at that field office locator link by using your zip code. So in order to apply, you have to complete the application. They'll make you do what's called a disability report, which kind of is giving information about your disability and the limitations that you experience. You would also have to sign an authorization to disclose information to Social Security, which is basically allowing them to get medical records from providers. And if you have an attorney at this point, you would also appoint a representative via the 1696 form. It's really important that you complete your application fully. So like all those questions on your disability report or whatever they're asking you, it's really important to thoughtfully respond to those answers because they do use those to review and determine whether you might be approved. So first, the Social Security office will determine non-medical eligibility. So for SSI, that would be whether you meet the resource requirement, and for SSDI, that would be your work credits and work history. If you're eligible that way, then they'll send your medical information to DDS or Disability Determination Services that we spoke about earlier. The DDS analyst gets that medical evidence. Sometimes they send you to a CE, which I spoke about earlier, which is a consultative examination. And they'll sometimes also have a medical consultant. Those are doctors. And they'll review whatever that evaluation was, your medical records, all the things, and they'll make a disability determination. And then your folder as a claimant would be returned back to the local field office. And that field office will notify you of a letter of your decision by a letter in the mail. That letter will usually be titled something like notice of disapproved claim or maybe approved claim, whatever, it will be labeled at the top. And so that's how you know what's happening with your case. And so it's important to check the mail after you apply. We'll talk a little bit about appeals. So unfortunately, many applications get denied. That's kind of just how it goes. We'll go through this chart here that talks about some of those denials, but as you can see, your chances go up a little bit. So it's important to go through the appeals because the best chance of winning is actually down at the ALJ level. So we'll go through these, and it's important to remember that these are nationwide figures. This is not specific to North Carolina. So North Carolina could differ a little bit from the numbers that we see here. At the top here, we have our initial application. This is where you go to the SSA field office or you apply online, and most of those are denied. Unfortunately, 61% of those are denied at the initial application level. So at that point, you should request reconsideration. And what happens when you request reconsideration is the case is sent back to DDS, Disability Determination Services, and different people from the first time are going to review your medical evidence and make a new decision. As we can see, they usually still deny it. 85% of the time, DDS says, no, we're still going to deny. At that point, you would submit a request for a hearing. That hearing would be with an ALJ, an administrative law judge. And at this point, you have basically your best chance. 45% of cases are allowed at the ALJ level. So that's kind of where you want to keep appealing to try to get those good chances. At that point, if you are not approved, you could request review. You request review, goes to the appeals council that we talked about earlier. That's a panel of judges who will review the decision and determine whether to allow it, to dismiss it, to remand it, or to deny it. If your case is denied at this level, you could submit a complaint for judicial review, and that goes to federal court. So while these stats aren't great, there is some hope that if you keep appealing, your chances of being successful increase. Appeals have deadlines, and I will say the most important thing is that when you get any kind of letter or notice from Social Security, you have to fully read that notice, like past the first page, because it'll have your deadline somewhere in there that gives you how much time you have to respond, to appeal, to whatever. It's so important to read those notices. The general 60-day deadline is what will apply for filing appeals. And while you should file your appeal immediately, if you know you're going to file it, you should get on that. You do get an extra 5 days from the date on the notice. You'll get 60 days plus 5 for mailing. So while we're all going to submit them on time, and if it happens that you don't, you get 5 extra days to make that 65 days from the notice date. If the case is an SSDI or SSI termination, reduction, or suspension, a claimant can generally get aid pending the appeal if the appeal is filed within 10 days of receipt of notice. So this basically means that if you're already receiving benefits prior to now, and you receive a termination and it's for a medical reason, you can ask Social Security through your appeal, as long as it's within 10 days, to give you benefit continuation pending the outcome of your appeal. So this is just another reason why if you get a notice, you read the whole thing. If you're going to appeal, you do it as soon as possible. Because if you were already receiving benefits, it's to your advantage to get that benefit continuation. Even though we're all going to be so great and appeal within the deadline, in the off chance that you're unable to submit the appeal within the deadline, there's something called a good cause for late filing of an appeal. That means that if you have some really good reason why you are not able to submit your appeal on time, you can let Social Security know, I have this great reason, and they might allow you to still submit your appeal. A really good reason is something like, I was in the hospital for an extended period of time. I got the letter in the mail, but obviously I wasn't home, and so I missed the deadline. You would submit that to Social Security, letting them know I have a good cause. I was not home. I was in the hospital. I couldn't get to the notice, and try to file your appeal that way. Appeals are filed online or at the Social Security field office. And it's really important that when you file your appeal online, it'll give you something called like a confirmation, and it'll have the date and time. You should save or print that receipt that you've submitted it. And then if you go in the office in person, they can stamp it with the date of when you submitted it, and you should keep a copy of that stamped one or the receipt from where you submitted it online, just to have proof that you appealed on time and it was submitted. And so now I'll take any questions that anyone has. I've listed the legal aid helpline on here. If anyone thinks that they might have an issue with an appeal, maybe reach out and see if someone can help you.
You guys are free to type questions in the chat, in the Q&A box on Zoom or in the comment section on Facebook. I do see some raised hands. Unfortunately, you cannot unmute in this form. You will need to type your questions out. And once again, be sure to keep your questions as general as possible. I am also posting a link into the chat for a link to Legal Aid of North Carolina's website, as well as I also posted a link to if you or anyone you know has been impacted by Tropical Storm Helene. I also posted a link to some resources about that. Okay.
And keep in mind for the questions, obviously, I'm not your attorney. You don't want to put your personal information on the internet, first of all. So I can answer general questions that were within the scope of the presentation, but anything other than that, I don't think I'll be able to go into.
First question for SSI, is the limit 2K per month?
So, okay, let me be clear. I'll go back here. So the difference between these two bullet points, the benefit amount that the maximum benefit amount that you could receive per month is $967 for 2025. However, because it's a means tested program, that means you can only have so many resources. And one of those requirements is that you don't have more than $2,000 in any given month, like in your bank account. And so that refers to that resource for individual. And if you're a married couple, that's up to $3,000 in a bank account in any given month.
Someone is asking what would be some of the qualifying mental health disabilities that might qualify for one of these benefits? What are some of those?
There are a lot, actually. SSA uses something called listings, medical listings. And then there they'll list some of the things that you could receive disability for. I would encourage you to go onto the website and look at those medical listings because there are too many to know or name here.
I am putting a link to those listings
Thank
in
you.
the chat right now. Ashira, I don't know if you can pull up the chat, but there is a really, really long question in the chat that I think might be too specific for this form, but I wanted you to take a look at it to see if there was any kind of information you can provide to that person. It's a two-part it's like the first two questions in the Q&A box. I don't know if you can pull that up. You might have to stop your share to see it.
I don't believe that I can.
Yeah.
Would you mind sending it in the chat to me?
Oh yeah, actually, that is why have I never thought to do that before? Okay. Here you go. Da, da, da. I sent that, and then someone's asking, should someone even bother to start a disability claim without an attorney?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part?
Um, they're saying, should someone even? I guess they're saying, is it worth it for a layperson to start a disability claim without the assistance of an attorney?
Absolutely, yes. Your initial application is essentially all personal information. They're asking about your condition, doctors, medications, all things that an attorney would not know about you. So it is wise to start your initial application without representation. And here at Legal Aid, we get in later stages. So if you're unsuccessful, then you come to us. So I would absolutely encourage you to apply, even if you don't have an attorney.
Not seeing any other questions at the moment.
Just reading this.
Yeah, so I'll give you a few moments to see if you can figure out a response.
I see some information here, but I don't see a question.
It's at the, oh, it didn't do the next one. Hold on. Okay. That is my apology.
So it looks like some frustration maybe with how long the process can take. And it can take a long time. That's not abnormal. And so once DDS or when you request reconsideration, once DDS has your case, it can be there for a while. And there's not really much that you could do to expedite that. Unfortunately, that's kind of just how the process works. So if your frustration is with the time frame, that is just a feature of Social Security.
All right, perfect. I'm going to give it just a few moments here to see if any last questions come in. All right, as I am not seeing any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you all so much for joining us for the special, oh wait, spoke too soon. Okay, yeah, there's no way to respond to that. Um, Thank you all so much for joining us with a special thanks to Shira for presenting for us. If you would like to review anything discussed today, we have posted a recording of today's session to our Facebook. It will be immediately available. You can access this recording with or without a Facebook account at www.facebook.com/legalaidnc. If you would like to register for one of our other Listen to Learn presentations on things such as child custody, tenant rights, Medicaid rights and eligibility, you can do so on our website at legalaidnc.org/clinics. Thank you all so much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.